Welcome to the Potboiler. I'm Patrick Hughes, and this is Hollow Grim and the Winter in January, Part 3. Potboiler is an old term for pulpy paperback genre writing that I think deserves to come out of hibernation. I hope you agree. Let's do the intro. Hollow's strategy has turned to desperation. Uncertain in the dropping temperature exactly how much of his life has left him, he knows his choice now is to act or let the cold take him. But without knowing which of the judge's enemies has taken this action on him, his disadvantage is practically a death sentence as it is. 3 episodes of this story will be offered with no embedded commercial interruptions. Visit patrickhughes.ca for links to me and my other projects. Please stick around after the story for some very light business. Enjoy. Let's play the music. Hollow Grim and the Winter in January, Part 3. December. Winter fell into the fall 2 years back like a shadow was thrown over the desert. I can remember the gray November sky, changing as the darker north wind tore its way down over the plain. It was the first thing discussed by everyone in town, the somber sense of how the year would end. I'll remember the day well, in the early part of December, as the last day Judge Irving Jameson presided over a Nevada courtroom. I wasn't present that day, but the account was common enough to the people telling his stories. Doc and I had more details from the old clerk Hammond, a regular patron at our tavern. The day started like any other, with wooden chairs dragging across the wooden floor to their positions in the courtroom. The air, as always, was stale and still. Case was a simple disagreement between merchants on Gold Hangers, Main Street. It's un-American. It's offensive. It's treasonous. And worst of all, it's bad for business. It certainly must be. My brother fought from Texas to Georgia and died in southern dirt fighting to stop rebels from burning down our country so they could keep their slaves. They lost the right to wave that southern shit when their rebel army was rightfully put down. They lost a great deal, and rightfully. A sign saying the South shall rise is not legal. It should not be. Neither should this damn Confederate flag. Perhaps it should be illegal. It is not. I'll have to beg to differ on that, Judge. A voice that knew how to be heard spoke from the gallery. You may not interrupt court proceedings, Senator Worthington. Sit yourself down. As the keeper of the court's decorum, Hammond proudly described his harsh tone. I'm sorry, Judge. People shouldn't be sorry for committing crimes. They should be punished. What you should be sorry for is the inconvenience of your lack of etiquette. You are costing everybody time. In court, I am to be referred to as Your Honor. Your Honor. This matter needs to be heard. What is heard before this court, when it is in session, is the matter of legal record. Outbursts are in contempt of this court. Search for legal outcome in the case before it. Talk again when not residing at this bench or in the seat to my right, and you will go to jail. Language of treason will not be tolerated in the great state of Nevada, will it? Former Senator Werner Worthington was talking to the people now and not to the court. He was after some votes. They can take down their sign or take their asses back to Mississippi. The U.S. Constitution disagrees, Senator. The South will stay right where it is, and all my brothers in blue coats will have died for the right thing. His anger gathered steam with every syllable. That thing is that document that says from ocean to ocean a man has the right to speak freely. You don't get to run him out of town for the sake of political theater. You get to disagree and go on living. The judge knew full well that Worthington was mounting a campaign to reacquire the Senate seat he had lost almost a decade before, and that his politics starts by identifying differences. Rumbling discussions were swelling in the gallery between them. Sheriff Dunn, Hammond, get the senator out of my court. The sign is going to stay up, my gavel is going to drop, and I will have a word with him in my office before he goes to your jail. Growls and jeers grew as the senator was escorted from the court with an expression of triumph. Judge Jameson rapped on his gavel like he was sinking a nail. This court will have order. I don't need a single one of you to get this done. The shitty Southern shit sign stays. We're done. His gavel dropped. He left immediately for the transparently political argument waiting for him. The words between them in his chamber shortly after were not exchanged quietly, but no one could quite be sure exactly what was said, or if any resolution was found. Worthing left sometime after with his waiting entourage, among them Willie Tester, in his ill-fitted vest and jacket, while Jameson remained. It was late into the evening before he left himself, as no one saw him go. There was never a formal letter of resignation on record, likely instead a hand-delivered letter between friends to the Attorney General. Doc and I spent a conversation or two on what could have been said to Jameson to make him leave, when he had always acted as though fear of reprisal was no motivation for him. Worthington had an undeniable ability to alter the weight of any leverage. But we couldn't fathom a spoken or written word that could bend the old man's path. Jameson made the trip to our tavern just one time since. Sat quietly by himself, staring back at the room through the large mirror Gertrude had hung over the bar. He finished it, nodded warmly to Doc and I, and left without a word. Winter continued to pile in on us and shut us in. We didn't think of not seeing anyone as we survived our hibernation. We got used to not seeing the judge, but each heard an occasional update from farm hands and delivery men. In my wounded state on the ridge, I started to think more about rest, embracing the idea of fading off to sleep. An occasional shock of pain mercifully ran through me as I waited for evidence to cross my senses on that cliff as the path of my memories of Irving Jameson came to the present day. The puddle of my blood around me was cold in my clothes and freezing around the edges. Sometimes the start is where things end, and that can be the point of the story. Every year ends the moment it becomes January again. A new spike shot through me as a crack rang out through the darkened sky. A surge of energy filled my body as the game again changed. January. I had started to let my eyelids get heavy, considering if I could allow myself to drift off for a moment. The report that jolted me was from the rifle hunting me, finally making a third shot. The shot went over my head, well above the ridgeline. I peeked slightly over my rock down the valley to find the line back, when the rustling and an odd growl caught my attention from above. Another shot ricocheted on the rock face in front of me, barely missing me again. I dropped into my small crevice as the rustling above continued. The muzzle of a massive gray wolf peeked down at me from the cliff. His feral eyes beamed at me through the low light, like he knew I was trapped. I clenched for a moment, feeling the corner I was closing in on me from the other side. As I considered hopelessly how to defend myself and stay shielded with my rifle at an awkward angle, the wolf tumbled forward off the ridge and landed dead beside me, with a rifle shot in the shoulder. The shooter took the approaching predator before it could attack me. My astounded stare was locked into the motionless wolf longer than it was advisable, as my exhausted focus was weakening my ability for deduction. It was either a motivation to keep me alive or deliver more death, the latter being enough. I spent what I had left with my focus on why the rifleman hunting me had just saved me. Only one scenario made enough sense to pursue. The descending dusk was finally offering a potential advantage. Killing the wolf had confirmed, perhaps intentionally, that my opponent's position hadn't changed. Charge of energy kept me alert for the moment as I prepared my rifle to move and hoped intently that I would have sufficient equilibrium when the moment was right. It took me longer than I hoped, but was able to slowly inch the wolf carcass into a new position with a carefully positioned rope. I tested the action of my rifle, pulled it in close, tightened the strap of my prosthetic right leg, and log-rolled myself slowly down the ridge. The valley stayed silent as I finally got to the lower flat on the trail. Setting my first shot would be hardest, staying low and preparing to instantly shift to my second. I took aim back up at the trail, calmed my tired grip, and fired my cold-barreled first shot. My bullet rode low as the trajectory could allow, tightly to the ridge wall where I had met the trail, past the boulder, shrubs, wind gusts, and undulations of the stone, cutting the rope I'd thrown over a limb, holding the wolf carcass against the ridge wall. The low angle on the flat hid the muzzle spark from below while the sound and spark of the ricochet went out across the valley, lighting the figure of the dead weight dropping. I was already aimed down at the valley as it fell. The last of the yellow in the sunset across the valley was burning into red. I could just make out the edges of where I set my aim. There was no hesitation from the shooter. 2 more shots hit the ridge. The first was right into the wolf's dead body before it had even settled back into the ground. The second was right at me, in my hidden location on the flat. Despite the ability from any man on a normal day, he had me like I was wearing a lantern on my head. The bullet hit the rock edge inches from my face, bursting tiny bits of sharp stone that cut and embedded painfully into the side of my face, just as I ignited my second shot. I fired directly between the shooter's 2 bullets. I couldn't play our game any longer. My blood loss didn't leave me enough time. I had to end this quickly. With pistols at 10 steps, just using our rifles. A mix of confidence, exhaustion, and anger, I knelt up in my spot and took aim again. I could see a shift in shadow, a slight glimmer of steel. Another shot rang out from his blind that went just past my shoulder and into the rock behind me. My rifle ignited. My bullet fired, lighting up the low light once again. I had my shot. I didn't bother crouching back down again as I saw his gun fall. I knew enough about my line and my skill to see a hit without setting eyes directly on it. I stood there, strangely unsatisfied, with my view still locked on my target with no name. My weary brain kept hovering over Willie Tester as my top suspect. I have to find the judge and close their old vendetta. To have one last story he could brag about over a poker table. Willie's frame hung wide over his belt, but was always capable with his weapon. Worthington always had 1 or 2 operatives at his side with a depth of skill at killing. I was prepared not to know the face looking up at me, but recognize the character. It was also a group of visual triggers that easily identifies a visitor from the Chicago area. One startling conclusion or the next, it was time for this to be finished. I started my labored walk down the ridge. Every step I take is measured. Almost 30 years standing on a false leg on uneven desert dirt has taught me to be thoughtful with every foot forward and conscious of the next one and the one after. Doc says that excessive thoughtfulness is what made me the best shot under the Nevada sky. Dragging myself forward across the valley floor in the low remaining light, I took my time over the logs and rocks to the blind in a stand of trees. I could see a figure, nearly motionless in a glimmering strip of steel. In the final moments of my approach, with my rifle at half rise, I could see the movement of his breathing. His chest moved up and down steadily. I could see the 2 wounds in his shoulder and chest, quite likely fatal. My steps were almost silent, but he must have sensed my approach with a turn in my direction. His rising chest didn't pause or change rhythm. The relaxed reaction brought the ordeal together for me. Good evening, Your Honor. Mr. Grimm. He labored his words through his pain and exhaustion. Quite a winter we're having this year. It must be the coldest January in 10 years. Well, January was never meant to be liked. He groaned in discomfort as I helped him to a sitting position. This wound doesn't look good, sir. I'm a goner, son. That's okay. His spirits were oddly light, considering the weight of the moment. I suppose I just need to know one thing. Was I your target? He took time with his answer. His hair and beard were months overgrown. He looked like he'd hardly eaten in weeks. But he had a smile I'd never once seen across his bench. Yes, indeed you were my target. He remained oddly proud in his confession. That's the hunting path your daddy used to take you on. Every Sunday in the winter, like clockwork. The setting sun had fallen from the night sky, leaving the wide, empty darkness and the stars pouring through. Jameson looked up peacefully across the sparkling expanse like his work was done. His eyes began to close like he was passing off to sleep. He stirred himself awake and raised his finger in a weakened version of a gesture he would use in court. They used to call me Judge Reaper in the war. Seemed warmed somewhat by the memory. He struggled through a cough before continuing. I could do no wrong with a rifle. I thought it was something special until you came along, kid. Back in those days, I thought I could come back to the bench and be fierce enough to make criminality too damn scary to try. It seemed reasonable in this cold and weary madness that the judge had reached some kind of ending that required a new worthiness. Perhaps his age, desperation, told him to kill or die, or kill then die. Sometimes a dramatic final gesture is a punctuation meant to define the whole line in front of it. A man alone in a white frozen desert, living without the influence and purpose he once held, could certainly need that kind of assertion. Being forgotten then can be worse as a purgatory than being remembered unfondly. The thought quickly moved past me. I could sense that it wasn't the case at all. There was more to this. I know this isn't it, Judge. You could have chosen that cliff to the northwest across the valley. I wouldn't have stood a chance. You've got no provisions. A shooter packs for at least a day. You've stocked for a one-way trip. His quiet chuckle caused him clear discomfort from his lacerations and pressured internal bleeding. Nothing's ever easy here. In the winter, easy is impossible. My father used to say that. He nodded a warm acknowledgement. I somehow found myself looking forward to the cases Charlie was in. As ugly as they could be. He could always make the case break down to right and wrong, the way I needed to hear it. Your father never got old. There's a fortune in that. He never saw his winter. I'm so jealous of him. I think he would have said, even impossible is worth a look. I don't regret a single day. I just wish I had more time. Back in the summer sun. I'm sorry it had to happen this way, Hollow. Neither of us has much time. I know this isn't suicide or murder. Maybe you should tell me about that last conversation with Worthington. You are good at this, son. Again, he raised his finger to harness my attention. Senator Worm Worthington had his final word with me a year ago. It was my last day on the bench. I stayed late that night after he left and wrote 3 letters. One to the Attorney General, stating eloquently that my time on the bench was over. One to my attorney with a change to my last will and testament. And one to the subject of Worthington's threat. I left it all set. Everything is in place. What is in place? What needs to be done? I had a wife when I was about your age. He spoke slowly through his waves of pain. Feels like she was taken a minute after I married her, and I still don't know what a day is supposed to look like without her. Clenched his jaw and refocused. I found a way to make Sally's life leave something more than a light in my memory. He hesitated and shifted his failing concentration. I thought I had until spring to lay the snare, but he moved up the timeline. This is the only way to set the financial wheels in motion. It's time to take the worm's house down. Are these wheels set by your death? Is that what you changed in your will? Justice isn't something that's ever going to be solved. We choose our side of the line and we take our shots at the other when we've got them, hoping it stays at least in balance, all the while watching the other side hope for the whole thing to fall. He looked up with a rare grin. Worthington gave me a target that night that came in with his threat. Doc had told me part of the story, at least the parts he knew from some years back, when Jameson first returned to the bench after losing Sally. He let a crooked lawyer cause a mistrial and get his wealthy defendant, Shelton Atler, an influential landowner and investor, off some very serious racketeering charges. At the time, Jameson looked the other way, so half the townspeople wouldn't lose their jobs. He also knew that his guilty verdict was likely to be overturned by a crooked authority somewhere upstream. Worthington had proof of the questionable mistrial, possibly enough to take his bench. A career criminal leveling his extortion never bets on mutually assured destruction. When a brief moral failure will save the extorted his own skin. What Worthington had truly failed to consider was that if the judge called his bluff and accepted the whirlwind, his own financial political benefactor would suffer as well. I get to finally expose old Shelton and take Worm's political road out from under him. All it was going to take was giving up the last thing I had that gave him any satisfaction. With my confession comes charges to us both. With standing charges, Nevada law says Shelton can't contribute to Worthington's re-election, which he'll have no hope without. With funds from Sally Cheney's family estate, I could anonymously offer a legal uncertified contribution amount. His shitty political career will be over before my letter gets to the postscript. He ran short on air and took a slow, long breath. I thought I had until spring to lay my snare, but he moved up the timeline by rigging the runoff election date. The Cheney funds were always held in trust, a gesture she and I offered her mistrusting clan so they couldn't go after it when she passed. To get the funds accessible fast enough, my lawyer needs a death certificate. Keep that transaction from getting held up in some quagmire. I needed that kill done clean. Shooting from you is practically a prescription. No one's going to question Hollow Grim. It's not the best plan I've ever heard, Judge. That was supposed to knock you down, not bleed you out. I'm sorry. I might have come up with something better if I had nothing but road ahead of me in time to walk it like you do, son. He's going to take that money. I'm betting my death on it. This is the last just thing I get to do. Your choice is just that, Judge. I can respect it. You wave at Worthington for me when he's run out of town. I know what he did to you and your dad all those years ago. Please make sure he knows that every sweet day he's got left ought to be sour, and I'll be the one waiting for him with your dad when those days are done. I will look forward to that. It's satisfying when you know you're a good man, Grim. Despite all your best efforts, I need to know that now. It was the right note to leave on. He reached out for a handshake that landed heavy in my hand, the last of his strength. He squinted a tired smile and leaned back slightly into the log behind him. He smiled to himself a couple more times before I looked over a few minutes later, and he was still. I stayed there well into the night, baffled by what had unfolded through this day. I could never have imagined a person designing such a purpose around their own life. I would never have placed an institution like Judge Jameson remotely near this kind of a plot. All the hatred I've tried to forget for Werner Worm Worthington smoldered behind my eyes. I forgot the shaking caused by my blood loss, the pain from my wounds, and even the hitch step over my right leg, as I remained consumed by the opportunity the judge had provided and how I could see it through for my entire walk through the night back to Progress. I set the trail blocks on either side of him before leaving. He was likely to be frozen by morning and not appetizing to the animals persistent enough to get close. I had one of Sheriff Tubbs' deputies out there the following day. According to his wishes, he was buried next to Sally and Agatha. No service was performed. I try to get there a few Sundays every winter. I was there the day Worm Worthington was arrested. It was a sunny morning in March, several weeks later. We all started to forget about the depths of our winter by then. Marshal Gannon was kind enough to give me the warning by telegram that his men were on their way with federal warrants. 2 alleys over from the new Capitol building in Carson City, to the rear and down just slightly from the office, he kept For his election operations, I stood with my rifle, testing its lever action that sounded like it needed some oil. The possibility always existed that he could choose to run and evade a public, peaceful arrest. Sure enough, he turned the corner in an anxious hustle, moving as quickly as he could, but trying his utmost to maintain a veneer of calm in the view of the public, with the authorities clearly right on his tail. He'd taken the money offered illegally through the Cheney Trust Fund. Gannon and I watched as he cashed every money order with his mysterious new benefactor. He knew this day was coming, but apparently he thought he saw a door. He decided to flee on foot like a common thief. When he was far enough down the alley that he felt safely out of view, he started into a full run. Panic was beaming wide across his face. There's nothing quite as satisfying as seeing a Senate candidate run. 3 or 4 heavy strides into his dash, he looked up and saw me waiting in the part of the alley with no turns or exits. He froze immediately and in one instant reviewed every conceivable negotiation tactic. I could see the exact moment in his eyes as he realized he had no escapes in front of him, no leverage, and no influence. All he had was the end. Hello, Worm. Quite a winter you're having this year. Regards, Hologrim. Thanks so much for listening to Hologrim and the Winter in January. Let's do the call to action. So if you like this story and you feel compelled to throw your support in my direction, the best way, the fastest route, is through my website, patrickhughes.ca. There you'll find access to my other projects, links to my books and ebooks on various platforms, and a contact me function if you want to reach out for more or ask me a question. You can also lend your valuable support by liking and subscribing and sharing on whatever platform you're listening to this on. It really makes a difference. Please add your voice with a click if you like what you hear. I do hope you share this. Let's not keep good fiction a secret. Thanks again for listening. Take care.